still to this date, at least in Scandinavia, men are not supposed to show too much emotion, neither positive nor negative.
Yeah.
But conversely, the suicide statistics is among the highest ones in Europe.
Hello and welcome to Share.care's What is Manly radio show and podcast. Men feel more lonely, lost, and not useful in society than ever in history. Males are not attaching to school, work, or women. What it means to be a man appears lost. Is there a framework for being manly that we can unearth?
Welcome to Share.care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. Share.care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning Share.care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
Fire it away. Awesome. Hello, Matias. How are you?
Hello, Damien. I'm fine all the way from Norway, where I've just started my day.
You've just started your day, mate. I'm looking at the sun going down, setting over I've got a forest out here behind me, and a beach beyond that. But it's wonderful that in the world that we live in today that we can connect over such a broad area, it's interesting. I don't know what you've seen, but there's a lot of talk about us being more connected in any time in history, but people feeling more lonely any time in history, which is kind of strange. I don't feel lonely chatting to you. I don't know what it's like for you.
Yeah, it is kind of a contradiction what you mentioned there, Damien. This one, you have so many apparently endless opportunities has been coming with a technological revolution, and still people feel lonely. Yeah, in my case, I actually do enjoy this format. It's kind of incredible. I can sit in my native Norway and I can talk with you at the end of the world, and it's so easily done.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm down the bottom of the world in Australia holding it all up. That's how we like to view it. But anyway, for the audience, who we have is Matias Sørevik, and he's a passionate Norwegian leadership coach, social entrepreneur, and freelance actor. And his background includes a career in the Royal Norwegian Air Force, studying economic geography, which I think is fascinating. And he also has experience in a career in sales and customer relationship. So on your side of the world, and you've got a broad range of experience here. I mean, you've been in the Air Force, you've studied, you've worked in sales. No doubt you met a lot of people there. In the world today, there's a lot of discussion about men feeling lost, lonely, not useful in society, not getting educated. About 40% of men now complete a diploma degree or that kind of thing. What have you seen in Norway? What's it like in there from your observations?
Yeah, there are plenty of things I can mention there, Damien. And I think in Norway and also the rest of the Scandinavian society in general, I dare say all of those societies are the most progressive one in Europe in terms of equality between genders. And you can see it in Norway when we were actually the first country of those Scandinavian ones where women were also allowed to vote during elections. So I've always been a bit ahead of our time. And since you mentioned I've been serving in the military, and so I think 5 years ago, they're also introducing a new system in terms of who had to serve. So during my time, we had compulsory conscriptions. We still do, but back then it was only for male. But now you're obliged to serve if you're a female and if you're being selected during those military sessions as well.
That's interesting that both.
So you do kind of see a change in that sense.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so there's been loads of changes in Scandinavian society in that sense. And you can also see the way the school system has changed, particularly since the 90s. There's been a change where now was prestige-filled jobs that were previously dominated by male. You had doctors and lawyers and psychologists. I was checking the statistics when I was preparing for that podcast yesterday, and I was surprised when I saw that I think 70% of those studying medicine they are women. When it comes to psychology, it's over 80%. When it comes to law, it is approximately 63%. And so those traditional gender roles, due to this, they are indeed changing.
And how do you think that's affecting the men? I mean, because again, is it from that perspective, is it similar in Norway where there's men feeling lost, lonely and not useful in society?
Yes, it is definitely having an impact on how men feel, because I suppose you can say right now we're in a so-called transition period where the male role, like you said, when from nature side, back during the Stone Age, men were the main providers of the family, and they had to go out hunting, and they had to be strong and show no emotion. And even though you can move a few centuries ahead from there onwards, and then the male role, it's not quite the same by no means. We're no longer having a bow and arrow and going out, but I think, there are some characteristics you can still see. When still to this date, at least in Scandinavia, men are not supposed to show too much emotion, neither positive nor negative. And it's been particularly in Finland debate about this, because Finland, they score extremely well in the school system. They score well in those international tests. Yeah. But conversely, the suicide statistics in Finland is among the highest ones in Europe.
Is that, when you say suicide statistics, is that are you talking male suicide or just generally?
It is like male suicides, because there are more male suicides registered than female ones.
And from that research, is there anything that indicates why that is the case, why that suicide rate is so high?
Well, it's only the most recent years they've been doing significant research in that field. And I do also suspect there may be lots of hidden numbers in those statistics. So those that may be accidents like in traffic, or apparently they may have fallen from a mountains and that stuff. There may indeed have been suicides. And I do think in Scandinavia, we are well known, at least in Europe. Don't know how much you know about this in Australia. It is kind of in Scandinavian countries, we're not the most open species of people, to be honest.
So it's not walking around going, "G'day, mate."
Not exactly. I can just share an example. We don't have Ireland, where I've been living and working for ages. We don't really have a pub culture, and you have lots of those unwritten laws in Scandinavian society. So you're not really supposed to talk to strangers, and they're more closed and reserved. And if you meet people on the bus, if you sit next to someone, try to have a small conversation, people are just going to stare outside of the window. They don't want to talk to you. they just want to have their own space.
Right. Do you think that's part of that contributor to that suicide rate? Is, I mean, one, you've got, as you were saying before, men are more in that hunter category if you go back in time, but they had a clear role. And now the world has changed, and the equality is great. When we need that, it's important to have that. But now that those roles have changed, do you think that that attitude of not talking to each other has made that more difficult to go through that transition?
Yes, definitely. Mental health and like feeling lonely and those things, there's still a stigma. But I don't think it's going to be easier if you're not talking about those things, or if you're not talking about anything at all. And I also think in Scandinavia, we don't really have many like those informal social interaction venues. Like in Ireland, when I was there, it was always easy to talk with people. There I can just go to the pub on the corner. I can go and watch football. I can watch rugby. I can just sit down. And I'm just, hi, pint of Guinness, please. And they're, oh, fantastic. Yeah. How are you doing today? Oh, I'm fine, thank you. And it just goes from there. So easy to talk to people in those venues. Conversely, in Norway, but we have pubs as well. But there, you're not supposed to talk to strangers again. And you're not really supposed to go to a pub in Norway on your own. I had a friend from England who was living in Norway. He was surprised about the pub culture. That was a big shock for him. He was just going into a pub. He was sitting down, ordering a pint, going to watch football. And everyone were staring at him. And then he was asking a guy, he said, you don't go to a pub in Norway on your own. People are going to think you're an alcoholic.
Wow. That's interesting that culture, that is the culture there, that you don't get. How do you meet people? I mean, isn't that how people date? They go to pubs to hook up and find people, or is that not the case in Norway?
It's not really the case, particularly among the younger generation. They usually don't go to pub. It's more about the nightclubs and just going out and howl. And was a dating expert ran into you a couple of weeks ago, and she said, in Norway, we have no dating culture whatsoever.
Wow. So how do you meet people?
Yeah. Usually in Norway, we are famous, and this is something I've been studying through my degree in geography. We are quite place-bound, you can say. So myself, I'm from Bergen in western Norway. And in this region of Norway, we are well known for being extremely patriotic, and we use loads of irony, and we're really proud of our city.
Yes.
And we always do our best to say, yeah, I'm from Bergen, and I'm really proud of it. Yes. And you can also see the same pattern across the rest of Norway. If you're from Oslo, from Stavanger, from Tromsø, you're always going to have some kind of pride from where you're from. And it can be hard to interact with certain people from different regions. Like for me, being from the west of Norway, it can be a challenge to talk with people from the east, where they don't use irony whatsoever. And they're also well known in a more general sense to be more formal and a bit more close compared to those from Bergen. So when you have those cultural differences within your country as well, it can be kind of a challenge.
Yeah. Is it, I mean, part of that is so it's that culture where there is that difference in how you approach things and it becomes difficult to interact. Is that?
Yes, definitely. It's hard for people from the east to understand people from the west, and also those people from the west, where I'm from, can be a struggle to, at least for me, understand those from the mid-Norway region. And there can also be traditionally certain stigmas from some of the regions. Say, if you're from the north of Norway, until the 80s, if you're moving to the capital to study or find employment, and then you were looking for a place to rent. And then you look to the advertisements, and it said black and white. No applications from Northerners, please.
Wow. So we just, so that must be, I mean, I can't fathom that. I mean, and I guess, and for me, it's kind of, I don't know if you remember the movie or have seen the movie Crocodile Dundee.
Yeah, of course, Paul Hogan.
Yes, yeah, well, yeah, and there's a scene where they're in the high-rise having at a party, and they're talking about a psychiatrist, and she mentions about, "Oh, don't you have a psychiatrist at Walkabout Creek? Because someone to unload your problems to." And he goes, "No, if we have a problem, we tell Wally. Wally tells everybody else, so there's no more problem." Um, and it just seems to be so. From my perspective, I'm listening to how you're talking, and for me, it's never been a problem to just go up to people and just chat to them, and well, more so ask questions, because that's the easiest way to have a conversation with someone, is to ask them about themselves, and they'll talk about you. I mean, if I was in Norway, um, and I walked up to someone and just had a conversation, how would that go down?
That really depends on who you are meeting, to be honest.
Yeah.
It also depends on the region you're in, and I think that can characterize Norwegian society. As
Mm,
like I said, we are place bound, and people tend to, when they are young and also way until adulthood, they tend to stick together with the same people as they always have. So
mm.
unless you move to a different city, then you're just going to be in the same environment as they always have, and just going to be there and talk with the same people about the same things.
Mm, okay. So how would someone go? Because we've talked about suicide, and I just want to raise that as well, because for anyone listening that might, be feeling that way, please reach out to somebody, because there are people, people will help you, or direct you to someone who can help you. And just have to flip through a number of the podcasts here and there's a number of people you could reach out to as well that will support you. So if anyone is listening and feeling that way, please reach out. Um, But if someone was like, if there's a guy, he's feeling a bit, feeling a bit lonely, what do they do? I mean, obviously you're not going to go to the pub, because you're going to get, thought of as an alcoholic, um, by the sounds of it. What does someone do if they're feeling a bit lonely?
Yeah, there are a few initiatives, and particularly among teenagers, the group I'm working in my social entrepreneur projects.
Mm,
It is a massive challenge happening in Norway these days, because we have this tradition in Norwegian school system. This is exclusively Norwegian. You don't find this anywhere else. It's called the sort of rust time, it's spelled RUSS. And this is a tradition when you're a graduate from upper secondary. Then
mm,
you're having a big party. So you're dressing up in those red pants, and you're going to different festivals, and you're just celebrating that now you are finished with school.
yeah.
And that should be a time for celebration, and you can actually talk with people. You can meet new ones. There's been a change in that one, because nowadays youngsters, they tend to form so-called squads, their own
Mm,
group of people, and this is starting already in the first year of upper secondary. And you're supposed to stick with the same squad basically for your entire duration in school. To say, if
mm.
I'm part of one squad, then I can't go and talk with someone from a different squad. Then they're gonna take me for being illoyal.
So it's really a
And
lot about loyalty, is it? From that perspective, you're
yes,
loyal to your region, or you're loyal to your squad. Is that the case?
yes, that's exactly the case. And when you have all of those unwritten rules, then it
Mm.
can be very hard to know how to interact, and you have to tread lightly when you talk to others, and how you do it, and so on, because you'll never know. When mistaken, you're out.
So if you're a member of a squad, so to speak, and you go and talk to someone else, um, your squad thinks you're a traitor, and then the squad you go on and talk to probably doesn't think very highly of you, because you have left your original squad. Is that?
Yes, that's exactly the case.
Do you interact playing sports or anything like that where you,
Mm,
just
Yeah.
how does that work? Or do you just,
Yeah.
you play your team and don't really interact with the other team?
Yeah, that's a good question. Just trying to think how to explain, because in Norway, we just to put things into context. There's this like a sociologist. He had a series, and they were just trying to identify what's a typical Norwegian, and he found out the one thing that characterizes Norwegian society, that is independence. So they want to be independent. Norwegians, they would like to achieve things on their own. They like to stand on their own, and they want to make a life for themselves. And that can also be reflected in terms of sports. So, in terms of viewers, by far the most popular sport is football,
Mm.
and kind of everyone is playing it during their younger years, from their around 6, 7, and as until they're 14, 15. Because you're reaching that age, it's no longer fun and games. It's turning more professional, and you're having expectations. So you're being expected. You have to show up for practice 3 to 4 times a week, and you also have to play matches, and when you also have to focus on school. It's kind of hard to get the schedule right. We have to go on. The way the sports system is set up in Norway, you don't play matches during daytime. You have to do it during your evening hours, and then you may be able to just get home from school and then just have your dinner and go straight to practice, or go straight to a match, and you have no time for homework.
Yeah, okay. And is that, I mean, because that's the solo, and I was just thinking about that because I used to be a big Formula One fan, and you guys have like some really, top Formula One stars. Is that partly because of that? If Formula One is a bit of a, you're a solo driver.
Yeah, I suppose we had a man called Petter Solberg. He used to be, I think he was a world champion. Now been interested in Formula One, to be honest, but yeah, Petter Solberg, I do remember.
Yeah.
And so I suppose that can be a reason. And you find a much more like racing culture using the countryside of Norway. They're also
Mm.
using their motorbikes more frequently than they do in the city where I'm from.
Yeah.
And also winter sports. That's a big thing in Norway. That's
Mm.
also a typical individual sports.
Mm. So how does, I mean, let's say you're not feeling, as a guy who's not feeling well, or needs some, more connection, and he's in his squad. Will the squad provide, that kind of support? Can you talk to your squad and go, "Hey, look, I'm feeling a bit," or is that because you mentioned about, this wanting to succeed by yourself? Is that, if you ask for help, is that you seen as a downer, or not something you did?
It is unfortunately a big downer. And it's also something I am looking for to change. And
Mm.
why this is a downer? It is partly because of the school system. Because from
Mm.
an early age, you're being told by our teachers that if you ask any questions, that's a sign of weakness. I've
Mm.
experienced that myself. When I was asking questions, when I was doing my food and cooking lessons, which are compulsory in lower secondary, I was actually
Mm.
being deducted in my grades because I was asking a question. I had to know those
Right.
things in advance, and those kind of experiences that made me think: what's the point of going to school if you're not allowed to ask questions and learn and grow?
Mm. It sounds like, I mean, you have this desire to, ask questions, and because you said there's something you want to change. What was the difference for you that you went, okay, I'm going to do something different here? I mean, because that sounds like a pretty brave step.
Yeah, yeah. And there's not one particular incident that leads you into the road you are taking. I think that for me, I did enjoy school during my early years, but then as you progress through classes, I still enjoyed going, but it's so much focus on the grades. It's not really focus on the individuals. And that's also related to what is manly, because you do undoubtedly, you have those differences between genders and how they behave in school. And traditionally, the school in Norway has been lots of female teachers. And then they will, when they are female and the school system is being adjusted, you have to sit down, you have to listen, you have to take instructions. Then you just sit there and you just write your thing. And from nature side, when boys in that age, they have a much bigger natural need to move. They're not made to just sit down. But girls that age, most of them, they do. It's easier for them to just sit down and do so. And then they're undoubtedly they're gonna more likely to do well in such a system.
So it's hard for, and I did notice that my son, for preschool, his half sisters went to an all girls school, but for the preschool, the boys could go. So we sent him there mainly because it was more convenient. Where his preschool was further away, so I thought it'd be good for him to do that. But as it turned out, when we were having an interview with the teachers, they said, "Oh, he's making train noises all the time," and I'm thinking, yeah, so I make sound effects when I do work. It's like I was thinking, well, what's the big deal? And they're going, but he's making all these train noises. I'm thinking, but he's a boy. It's like that's what we do.
That's a great point.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering from that perspective, is that what it's like for you? As you said, you've got a lot of women teachers. Is that from your experience in school that you weren't able to just jump around and express? Because boys are generally known as not being as compliant would be the right word. I know when I was in school, it was anything but compliant. Loved learning, but it wasn't compliant. But it sounds like from that perspective, at a very young age, boys are really encouraged to be compliant. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Am I hearing that right?
Yes. There's definitely a truth in that statement. And in Norway, we have a term for this. It's not like an academic term. They're calling it for good girl syndrome. So it is kind of, you're supposed to just be, like you say, compliant. You're sitting down, you're listening, and you're responding exactly the way teachers and also parents and every adult expect from you. So you're doing everything well, you're having top grades, you're excelling academically, then you're going out and you're looking and acting perfect all the time. It's partly what society expects from you. And that's why there are the people with the good girl syndrome. They can also be really vulnerable. If they're doing one mistake, they're going to be upset for days. And this strive towards perfectionism, both for girls and also you have boys that can also fall in under this category. They're in a really vulnerable position.
So this strive for perfectionism, does that feel like, from your experience when you were there, did that create a lot of pressure? Did it feel like you have a lot of pressure on you?
Yes, I did feel I had lots of pressure, particularly in upper secondary. When there's also a change as you progress to the classes. When I was younger, I was allowed to use more of my creative sides, and we had lots of acting and drama. And we were singing, we were playing music in class, all of those creative activities. And we also had longer breaks at school, and then we could go outside. And I was fortunate when I was in primary school. We had this fantastic outdoor area with a forest that we just went out and we played in. Then I came to lower secondary. There was first right. It was a concrete jungle, and it was no longer allowed to play. You were supposed to be one of the tough guys, You're supposed to behave in a different way. And then, as the Norwegian school system, that was the first time we're also having grades, and they considered everything you did, every essay, every test, every presentation you were having, and also this focus on the exams. And it's also a huge focus on following the curriculum when you're in Norway. So you don't have too much liberty in terms of the subjects you're choosing when you're going to write an essay about something. You have to write based on what's in the book, and there's also so much about the reference points and the interests of the teachers. So if the teachers don't understand what guys in the class are talking about, they're likely to not give you a good grade. And I also experienced this after school. When I was working as an after school assistant for a while, and there was a boy and I was working with, and the teachers did kind of struggle to understand him. So I tried to talk about him, and I asked him what he was interested in. And I said, yeah, I'm really into Star Wars. Like, oh, really? Well, that's wonderful. And I'd seen all the Star Wars film just before this happened, so I was able to talk with him. And we had some really good conversations, and I tried to explain this to the teachers. I was saying, because they couldn't understand how was I able to talk with this kid. I said, you're actually the only one that understands me. That's because you're asking me about what I am interested in.
And listening it's such a powerful thing to be able to interact with people, which we referenced before. So if, and as you said, you connected with that person simply by listening and talking about something that he was interested in. Is that, how does someone get help? We kind of touched on that before, but if you are feeling lonely, what can you do? You've got your squad. You can't go to another squad. If your squad's not helping, where do you turn to for help?
Yeah. In that case, if you are struggling, you usually rely on your parents. That's a thing. And in Scandinavia, even though we are progressive in terms of equality, we're also behind in terms of mental health. We definitely have a job to do there, and it is still considered to be a stigma if you need help from a psychologist and if you need help to talk to someone. And I think that's also related to the independence aspect, because then you are no longer independent. Then you need help from other ones to go by.
Okay, so there's that independence. So you're kind of the opposite of America, where everyone has their own psychologist.
Yeah,
I got lots of friends who are American, so I stick it to them, in a loving way. But so from that perspective, you can't. If your squad doesn't want to help you, how often will the squad be supported? Can you open? But I think from what I heard before, that you generally, to your squad, you're not going to talk about any weakness because it's seen as a weakness. Is that right?
yes, that is indeed right.
Yeah, and then from that perspective, if they, what about in school? Do they have, is there counselors there that you could go and see a counselor? Or is that frowned upon as well?
Yeah, you do have a counselor. You do, and that is more towards the academic stuff. Like if you are struggling in a subject, then you can go and talk to your counselor, and you can talk about. You do find this hard, or you're wondering if you perhaps can have a catch-up period if you're behind with your homework, or if there's a subject you've been taking in, like I can't do this. I don't enjoy it. What are my options? What can I do? Those kind of things.
That's more about how to catch up on study. Is that?
Yeah, it is. And what options you're having if you would like to change subject. And in recent years, that's a good change. There's been a more positive on in Norway, we call it for a health nurse, which is like a qualified nurse that students, they can go and talk to them, and they can share their problems, and then the nurse can give their advices on what the student should do next to feel better.
So that's a health nurse. Is that what you're saying? Is that something new that's in schools?
Yeah, we call it for a health nurse in Norway.
And how does, I mean, because you mentioned there's a stigma about that, would people be reluctant to go and see the health nurse if they're feeling problem because they're worried about, what other people might think?
Yes, they can indeed be reluctant to do so. However, we do actually have a lady who's the entire Norway's health nurse, and she kind of created a solution to this. She created her own Snapchat account where it was originally only for a local school, and
Yeah.
then students they could reach out on Snapchat, and then she would share her advices anonymously. But this became a huge hit all across Norway. And people were sending her messages whenever feeling down and what can I do? Who can I contact? And all of a sudden, she became all of Norway's health nurse. And we have so many people reaching out. Yes, there's definitely a need to look
Yeah,
into the mental health aspect for our youngsters. It really is. And it was all about, we can say, anonymity. That was all they needed.
that's interesting that you say that there was a health nurse. You put that out there, and all of a sudden it became like a viral effect by the sounds of it, where so many people were reaching out across the country to have that support. Um, which is wonderful to hear that step was being taken. Is it? I mean, is it more biased towards men not wanting to reach out for help than it is for women? Because that's something there's a bit of research showing that men are less likely to ask for help.
Yes, men are much less likely to ask for help if they need it. And I think when it comes to women in Norway, this again, generally speaking, they are talking much more about how they feel.
Mm,
Talking like, okay, I'm actually struggling, and now I didn't like what he or she was saying to me. Now I don't like this behavior from another one. I
mm.
think when girls are talking more about the feelings, like they do, it's also easier and it's kind of a relief for them. And conversely, for boys, they're not supposed to talk about their feelings, and if they are not happy with something, but particularly in their teens, they're more acting like they don't really give a damn. That's just their style.
Mm. And what about from the perspective when we talk about manly? Um, there's that physical aspect as well. Men are generally, this expectation that men be really, really fit, and you have your Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, big tough guy type thing. Is that a perception that people have as well, or is that that stereotype of what is manly different?
Yeah, yeah there's definitely a debate happening in Norway. Like you said, Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger. And there's been a change in terms of boys. Like I said, when they usually stop doing organized sport around the age of 14, 15, then the next stop for many of those is usually the gym. And
Mm,
they are kind of expected, yeah, they have to go to the gym thrice a week or so, and they have to work out, and they're supposed to have big muscles already by the age of 16, and they're supposed to be into nutrition and sort of optimize the strength and their daily life. And I think that the focus when it's exaggerated to the extent that it's not good for your mental health, where it becomes an obsession and you feel like you have to do this and you have to go to the gym, you have to eat that particular food, and you can't even have a piece of cake because then you're being not good enough.
mm. Do you think boys and men need to watch Die Hard more often? Because apparently when that script went out to all the typical action hero stars, and they all said, "Can't do this guy. He's a bit of a wimp." But it turned out to be extremely, extremely popular because it showed a more dimensions to being a man than just this tough guy persona. Do we need to have more of those kind of role models? Do you think?
Yes, we do need more role models among men that dare to be vulnerable.
Mm,
And it's funny you mentioned Die Hard. I was been thinking about the first Rambo film,
mm,
First Blood. It's
yeah.
kind of different from the other ones. And Rambo, I can also relate to this because I've been serving in the military. There's definitely a perception that people don't always understand what it means to serve in the military. I mean, you don't have to go to Vietnam. You can be in the military, and it is loads of pressure, and you have to be switched on all the time. And in First Blood, Sylvester Stallone is at his most vulnerable, particularly towards the end. We're just breaking down.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you mentioned there, because it's a very different dynamic in that movie compared to, as you said, the later ones. There's a little bit more dimension to the character. And that's what I was just wondering from that role model perspective, is it, when you look at the squads that you're talking about, do people look at these kind of, more people with more dimensions to them as role models?
Yeah, that also depends on the squad, and I would also say it depends on which region in Norway you belong to. It's not one answer fits all on that question. It really depends on your general environment, and usually based on my experience in upper secondary, those squads are usually formed depending on which school you went to previously. And also say, if you've been playing football for a long time, you're likely to stick with your former teammates. Also, after going to upper secondary, and you may not be open to those where you're not playing football with. They also have, generally speaking, those who are interested in fantasy, like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and Terry Pratchett, and those that would hang out together. And in my case, I was in upper secondary. I would usually hang out with rock and roll guys, just listening to AC/DC and Metallica and that stuff. And I was talking to people who were playing guitars.
Yeah, okay. And from that side of things, when we talk about, there's a lot of talk about toxic masculinity. And I mean, is that something that comes up much in Norway, about people, the male behaviors being toxic?
Yes, there's been debates about this, particularly on LinkedIn, where I've been active the last year or so, and having a few followers after my activities there. Toxic masculinity, it is definitely a subject when you're kind of, for some reason, expected that you have to misbehave, and you have to just show like, hey, I am your boss, and you have to obey me. And that's how you become a true man. And if somebody makes mistakes, or if they disagree with a boss, regardless of how constructive it is, they are partly expected. They have to scream and yell at this person to show who's in charge.
Okay. There's kind of authoritarian type leadership.
Yes, and not just authoritarian, but also the toxic way. Like, regardless of how constructive you are and how well you behave, you always need someone to just scream at them. I think also when it comes to organizational development, again, because men rarely talk about how they feel, and now they just want to be independent. They don't want to complain on co-workers who may bully others or maybe abusive to some extent. So just walk by and just do their thing, and this just increases the toxicity problem.
Yeah. Okay. And what about from the perspective of, there's a lot of talk about of men not being romantically involved, not getting involved with women, not having sex. Is that something that happens a bit in Norway as well, or is there a number of men are just hiding in their basement playing video games? I'm being a little bit facetious there, but not getting out and dating.
Yeah, that's also an increasing trend. I think not just in Norway, but also other European countries. And I'm not a scientist, so don't think there's one definite answer. But yeah, you do see an increase of single males, because you do, and also people usually settle down later these days than they did 30 years ago. And I do suspect part of it is because of the requirements of education. In Norway, it won't be uncommon if you're studying for 6 or maybe 7 years even before you actually starting to work. So by then, you're in your late 20s, and when you've been studying for so long, you usually have a debt to pay down, and after a year or two, you may have your first mortgage, and so you're being stuck by the time you're there. And usually, because of the, I think, again, like the generally speaking, the sort of requirements you put into yourself, like you have to do a good job in upper secondary, you have to do well in your studies, and you have to make a good impression when you're in your first job. People usually so exhausted by the end of the day that they may not have the energy to also keep on dating and looking for the love of their life.
And certainly, if you're exhausted, you're not thinking about sex. From that side of things, though, do you think, is it part of because you're being not sure how to talk to women anymore? Because I mean, I've seen in other countries as well, and people that I've talked to, that a lot of men are basically scared to talk to women because they're worried they're going to get in trouble if they say the wrong thing, or say something the wrong way. They're going to get accused of something. Or is that something that's happening that you've seen as well?
Yes, and there are, I think there are many factors for why this is happening. I think definitely the Me Too movement, it did have a profound effect on Norwegian society because it's considered to be such an egalitarian society. And when this came, and there are also statistics on this, men did indeed become much more cautious regarding how they were talking to the opposite gender, out of fear to not say anything wrong. And then the pandemic came a couple of years later, and it was impossible to meet anyone in real life. And then people turned to Tinder instead.
So just swiping.
Yeah, just keeping on swiping. And yeah, it is undoubtedly a good app to see who's available and who's in your area and see interest. But they usually tend to not find too many people on Tinder for long-term relationships. So there's kind of a need there. It is hard for men to know, okay, how can I interact with the opposite gender, and what can I do, and where can I even meet them? So I think we need more information, and you do need more of those portals where you can actually meet people that are interested in dating, and also meet them in real life, not just see them in front of a screen.
Because it's really interesting, that I find it fascinating, because men, as you're saying, it is common that men are not wanting, they're concerned about talking to women, but at the same token, women are going, we want to meet men. And it's kind of seemed to be, we're both at loggerheads here, and not really engaging with each other, which is what we're designed to do anyway. Otherwise, the species doesn't continue. How do you think men could actually move forward from here?
Yeah, that is a question with many answers. Yeah, I think they first off definitely need to speak more openly about mental health. That's the number one thing. There has to be more awareness about mental health, and they have to be more open to speak. Don't have to be with a psychologist necessarily, but more to their family and friends, and you should be more straight about what's bothering you. You have better role models in Norwegian society for that, to be honest. I've been doing digital nomading the past year, and then I visited the Netherlands. And in Norway, we tend to be speaking more indirectly about things, and maybe just beat a bit more around the bush. But then the Netherlands, on the other hand, they are much more direct. And they're just speaking straight out about what's the problem. I think we can learn something there in Norway, just to be a bit more direct. Like, I am struggling right now because of this. I'm wondering, how can I get help for this? I think that would be a good start.
So it really comes down to what you're talking about is more talking and more listening, is being able to have those conversations. Is that where we need to create a safe space where people can actually talk about things and it's okay?
Yes, safe space, and at least there's been an increase in those self-help groups where people go and what's happening, what's being said in the room is also going to stay in that room. But people are reluctant to accept those opportunities again because of the stigma usually, and they're a bit nervous but what if it comes out? So perhaps it should be done more work to be even more sure that things would indeed not come out.
So do we need more Wallies in Norway from Crocodile Dundee, do you think?
Yeah, definitely think so. And another thing that we should focus on is to get rid of the perfection aspect. I have to accept that people are different. And this comes down to both genders. Because the way the school system is being set up today, people are expected to achieve the same results at the same time as everyone else. And this is also during an age where not perhaps a handful in each class are biologically developed as they should be. Like your brain, it's not fully developed until you're in your mid-20s, and you're expected by the system to score top grades when you're 18, 19. Doesn't really make any sense from the biological aspect. And there should also be looked into more methods on how different individuals can perform well at work, at their studies, and also at their job. And at the same way, also have a healthy way of living, find a balance there so you're doing a good job, but also maintaining your physical and mental well-being.
Interesting from that perspective. Is it, because it seems like we're just coming back to being able to open up and talk. It seems like a fairly simple solution. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I think once you start talking and you dare to bring out what can be considered to be taboo subjects, and once you dare to talk about what's being difficult to you, in my opinion, that's the bravest people I've met. Those who actually dare to open up and they actually want to solve the problem.
It's an interesting point you mentioned about wanting to solve the problem and being brave at opening up, which I fully agree with. In fact, if you can open up and talk with people and share who you are, that's a pretty courageous thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you encourage people to do that?
Yeah. So in the work I'm doing now, I'm working predominantly with teenagers, and I'm also being really aware on the way I'm talking about leadership in this course, because the people I'm working with, that's teenagers who's been dropping out of schools. Again, I have both genders there, and the reasons for dropping out are so many. It's some people, they simply don't enjoy the theory at school. And there's been a change there as well, because until the 90s, if you didn't enjoy school and you just want to work, you just want to do something physical, it was so much easier. Say, if you want to become a painter or a carpenter, then you could just go to somebody who already had the occupation. You can join as an apprentice when you were 16. But nowadays, you have to go on 2 years of theory before you can go start your apprenticeship, and then you have to pass a test to be fully certified as a painter or carpenter, whatever vocational job you would like to do. And there's even more theory for people who are tired of it. And when you're 16 and you already disliked the system for maybe 10 years, you no longer have the motivation.
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems to be a lot of that, again, that being stuck in that situation where you want to try and expand and do things in a different way to what the system is expecting you to do. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, that's a good understanding of it. I suppose the Norwegian system is also slightly more bureaucratic than the one you're having in Australia, and things have to follow a certain procedure, regardless if you're 16 or if you're 30 or 50. They're sticking very strictly to the different rules. It's kind of a squared system in that sense.
Do you think, I mean, I'm just thinking outside the box here, is that a weather thing? Because in Australia, if we don't like it, we just go to the beach, but it's a bit difficult if it's cold.
Yeah, we don't have too many beaches in Norway, I'm afraid. But we do have a nice mountainside though.
Yeah, I mean, you could go out, I'm going to go skiing. I'm not going to go to school. I'm just going to go skiing, but you do need money for that. So
Yeah.
Unless you like walking up the hill. I've done that when I've been skiing. Then walking up the hill is not fun. Good for your health though.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and I enjoy hiking. In Bergen, where I'm from, we're actually having 7 mountains surrounding the city, so we have a brilliant environment for that. But I'm also envious about those lovely beaches you're having in Australia.
I do. Well, I love the European mountains because I love skiing over there. I've been mostly in Switzerland, but I enjoy being up in the Alps and skiing. It's a lot of fun. And is that, while we're talking about that, is that, something we can do more of? And as you see, you like mountain climbing, or walking through the mountains. Is that, do we need more of that kind of stuff where we just get out and kind of, as you say, that becomes a safe space to talk? Do you think that will help?
I think that would definitely help. If we could, like you say, have more of those groups. So the way when a lot of jobs, you have to sit still so much more. You have to sit in front of a screen, and with the pandemic, those things escalated. And in many countries, they're also having borders of you can go more than 2 kilometers away from your house. And in Ireland, where I was living at the time, there was also a video about a man who had a marathon in his own garden.
Wow. How many laps of the garden did he do to do a marathon? That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. I think he had to do approximately 1,500 or something.
Wow. Yeah, because I guess the lockdown did really affect that. Have you noticed from that perspective? Because we were talking about that before. I think in the pre-show we were talking about lockdown, and certainly at the start we're talking about the ability for us to communicate with each other, which is wonderful across the planet. But not everyone reacted well to that, to those lockdowns, because they were more isolated. Are people starting to come out of that, do you think? I noticed here in Australia when we had the Grand Prix, and I think I got confused between Finland and Norway. Sorry about that for earlier when I'm talking about Mika Häkkinen, who's Finnish, not Norwegian.
He's Finnish.
Yeah, so my apologies there. But do you think, from that perspective of, because I noticed here in Australia when we had the Grand Prix, this year was the biggest turnout they've ever had in history. And there's been a number of events that have happened where there's so many more people coming out. It seems to be that people are finally getting over, the fear of COVID and now sort of going out. Is that happening where you are as well?
It is starting to happen, I would say. Actually, last year, I was in this innovation festival in the Western Norway, where I was leading a panel discussion. And I had a chat with a festival manager before the contemporary social issues. And she was saying, it seems to me like youngsters these days have completely forgotten how to interact in real life. You do it so much online, and you don't really have too many of those venues where you can just go and have those informal chats. It's all being done online those days. Just the way it's becoming. However, you do kind of see a change where people may start to gather again. I think just after COVID, when the last restrictions were moved, at least for now, we've been having no restrictions in Norway for I think 1 year at this. And then straight afterwards, the ongoing conflict in Europe happening. I think it was 2 weeks afterwards. It's escalated, and then loads of the media attention was directed towards that one, and then they kind of make a slow start. However, this spring, I have seen more and more people spend time in the parks, and also finally, people are starting to attend football matches again. And now we're almost back to having sold out stadiums, at least in my hometown. I suppose part of the reason is because my local football club, Brann, are doing extraordinarily well and reached the Norwegian Cup final.
Got to get that plug in for your team. That pride is kicking in now. I love it.
Yeah.
It? I mean, and it's interesting that you mentioned, because you talk about the interaction and people not knowing how to interact. Because again, I'm older than I look, and I remember because when I was growing up, we didn't have mobile phones. We barely had computers. I certainly didn't have a computer growing up, and so it wasn't until I was in my 20s that I had. Well, my parents had one that did BASIC, but I didn't have a computer as such for a long time. Didn't have a mobile phone, and certainly when they did come, it was very basic texting, so you couldn't be Snapchatting or anything like that, or swiping. There wasn't anything like that. And I mean, I remember I was in Perth at the time I got bored with going out and getting drunk, but there was a nightclub that was ballroom dancing. And they structured the dances. They called them progressive dances. So you do a short routine, and then you move to the next partner. So and there would be these rings of people, and you'd be moving around, and it was like the ultimate in speed dating, because it had roughly 30 seconds, and you do this little dance, and then you move to the next person, and then if you found someone you liked, when the song ended, you're trying to find where they are so you can go back and chat to them. But do you think we need a little bit more of that kind of interaction, where we, rather than just, because I've seen young people on a date and they're both on their phone, and I'm wondering whether they're talking to each other or what they're doing.
Yeah, if I'm going to be honest here, Damien, I think what you just described is precisely what we need more of in Norway. We really do. And it sounds like a really fun way to just interact. And I suppose then you're dancing just for fun. You can also have a chat with your partner. And I think that's a great way to meet each other in person, rather informal. And of course, if it's done correctly, you're also having fun at the same time. And isn't that what most human beings would enjoy? Just have a nice time and have someone else in their lives that they also enjoy spending time with.
Yeah, because you mentioned that, just enjoying and having fun. Do you think, with all these pressures, we've just got a little bit too uptight, and we just need to chill out a little bit and just not get so offended and just enjoy each other's company?
Yes, I would say so. We do need to have more of those informal things, and there's also part of the work I'm trying to implement into my workshops. It is kind of about you ask that guy who's usually sitting alone during lunch hours. You go over to him, then you talk to him, and you do your best to kind of understand who is he, and perhaps he's having an interest same as yours, and perhaps he's just a bit shy and don't enjoy interacting too much, but because you take the initiative, then he starts to talk, and then he can become your friend. And we do need different types of person in our respective squads, and I think that's where true leaders are coming from. When you do start to understand who you're spending time with, who they are, when you start to talk, they are going to have so many strengths you were not aware of.
Yeah, I love that. I love the work you're doing. If we wrap this up, but do you want to? Can you wrap it up into a nutshell as to what you think a good framework for being manly is?
Yeah, I think good man should be a leader, and I'm always having a distinction between the leader and a manager. Or a manager is more focused on control, system, process. The leader, he focuses on the human beings. He focuses on values. He focuses on leading others and also being a part of a community bigger than himself. I think a true man, he has to be brave, and he has to share his experiences, both the positive and also the more negative ones. And that man, he should be in charge, but he should also be in charge for the right reasons, not just to show off. He should be there, and he should behave well towards everyone.
I love that. That's awesome. Matt, it's been wonderful having you on the show and having these conversations. And thank you for taking the time to share your experiences with what is manly and your opinion of what is manly. So thank you for taking that time. And I'd love to catch up again in the future at some point if you'd like to do that. But thank you for taking the time and sharing with our listeners.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being part of the Share.care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes for others and for you.